This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
I'd like to convene the Tuesday, February 28, 2023 North Haven Fire Commission meeting to order. I'd like everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask for the approval of the minutes from the Board of Fire Commission meeting held on January 24th, 2023, as well as the special meeting of the Board of Fire Commission meeting held on February 9th, 2023, and February 16th, 2023.
So moved.
Is there any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved. Chief's report.
Good evening. Just going to start off with alarms as we normally do. Give me 1 moment here, please. Shut some things down, just nothing makes some noise on us. 2021 at this time we were at 844 alarms. As we sit here today, we're at 737. Our last regular commission meeting was on January 24th, so I'm going to cover some stats since that time through essentially yesterday. So 16 responses to the highway, 107 incidents that just an ambulance responded with no fire department resources being required. 58% of our calls were EMS related, and there were 435 incidents, 84 of which were occurring at the same time, which accounts for a 19% overlap. Regarding the budget, at this point in time, we are at 67.4%. That is through period 8. We're just about through period 8 here. At this time last year, we were at 69.4%, so essentially on mark from where we were last year. Regarding the permit fees, since our last meeting, the fire department collected over $144,000. That brings our total for this year at just about $395,000. More than covers the expenses the fire department is incurring right now, considering it's really in this year's budget a full-time inspector only, and that's it. So we've covered that just in this last month alone. The fire marshal's office, the commission was all provided with a report from the fire marshal's office. You'll see on there 16 different fires that had an investigation associated to them. 56 inspections in the month of January, 5 plan reviews, 77 permits were approved, 36 record requests, and 33 public inquiries. And you'll see a number of different properties and so forth, types of properties anyways, that were inspected since during the period of January. That is all I have for the chief's report. I have some items we can cover under executive session, and that concludes my report.
Is there any question of the chief regarding his report?
I just have a couple of questions. The fire investigation, the ones that say engine malfunction, what do those mean?
Typically, it's going to be associated with a car fire and it's an engine overheat or something like that.
Okay. And then the stolen car, same thing, the engine overheat?
Yeah, there's no investigation on that just because we don't know if it was intentionally lit or if it was a malfunction in the engine.
Okay.
Obviously, the fire marshal's office continues to be busy, both with inspections and certainly inquiries. And the fires, Chief, were there any significant fires out of those 16 that we experienced this time?
Yeah, this goes back to the month of January, so
Yeah.
we're well over a month ago.
Yeah.
I honestly don't remember if there were any of these were significant or not. Yeah, there are some, because if you look at the value, yeah. Nothing I would say major.
50,000, 58,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions of the chief or the fire marshal's office reports? Hearing none, we'll move on to the correspondence. I'm sorry, the correspondence, yes. Has anyone received any correspondence, chief?
Other than normal day-to-day correspondence, I have two correspondence I want to share with the commission. The first is related to the orders we have for the two engines, which are provided to the commission in the form of email. The two engines that were ordered have been delayed. So these engines, there was an order placed in May of 2021. We're now expecting the engines to not arrive until March of 24. So a year from now still. We are hoping for the fall of this year, and with this correspondence we just received, they got pushed off about 6 months. The letter references the various different shortages in the supply chain right now that are attributed to the delay. So this certainly puts an impact on the department operations, because it's now that much longer that we have to wait for engines to arrive, and we'll have to just make it work. That's one correspondence. The other I received, I wanted to discuss with the commission, is I have a resident who's asking about putting up lawn signs in individuals' properties and homes saying that we need volunteers. I don't have budgeting for that. I'm not saying it's a big expense. We can probably find it somewhere, but I want to discuss with the commission the optics of that. I don't know that there's a lack of awareness to the fact that we need volunteers. I mean, it's if you just pick up any simple newspaper, social media, news station, anything, you see everywhere that we need volunteers. I don't think it's a lack of awareness. I don't know that additional signs are going to do anything. I think it's lack of availability of people. The other thing with that is just that kind of that negative optics to it of how desperate are we that we're putting up lawn signs, and now when the lawn signs blow away down the street, who's ultimately going to be responsible for having to go pick them up and getting phone calls and complaints? And so I'll do whatever the commission chooses. Just I have a resident who's asking about that, and I'm not against the idea. I just want to talk it out loud.
So are they asking that it become part of the fire department budget to get these signs and put it out?
No, my understanding is we still have banners or signs up at
Every station.
each of the stations regarding solicitation or recruitment of volunteers. And I know in North Haven Public TV, there's also a banner on the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, we've advertisements on TikTok, on
Yeah.
Facebook. We have advertisements in a lot of places. I just don't want to necessarily take on the ownership of saying no without discussing it with the commission. I understand the idea behind it, but just don't know that we're going to necessarily get the impact that we're looking for.
It'd be my opinion that we continue to stay with the fire stations advertising, and certainly North Haven Public TV. I mean, we can certainly, look to the local weekly papers if we want to put an ad in asking for recruitment of volunteers. I mean, we can do something like that.
There's been articles in the papers that talk about it. If you look at really that target audience of what we're trying to capture, that under 30, they're not reading newspapers, they're not watching NHTV. They're looking at social media and news channels, and we have that covered. Are we out there all the time? No, but everybody knows it. Every town in America now needs volunteers. So
the other thing is, in that segment of the population, either they're working or they're in school, or they're not at this point proven to be willing to do the things that are necessary to be a volunteer. So, any other thoughts, ideas?
I'm just not sure it's worth the return for, having signs up. I do think it would be a problem that we're supplying signs and then are we responsible for that?
Sure.
okay. That was the only correspondence I wanted to run by the commission other than the normal day-to-day stuff.
So I think, Chief, if you want to get back to this resident, or if you want me to get back one way or another, we can certainly do that. Thank you for your suggestion. The commission is not in favor of that. Have any commissioners received any correspondence? Hearing none, we'll move on to old business of the department.
Old business, I've got a couple of items. The engines I just discussed, the apparatus that was struck on the highway in December of '21 still remains out of service. and I don't expect that back for at least another month. There is progress finally being made on it. Some of the parts that we're waiting on have arrived, but that engine's been sitting now for quite some time. And so I'm not going to rush to put it back in service. We're going to have to put it through its paces for a while and make sure that nothing broke while it was not being used for the last year and a half. We also took delivery of a leased engine right now because we are in such dire need of apparatus with the situation that we find ourselves in with our fleet, particularly with our engines. I did execute a lease agreement. We talked about that during this meeting in the past, and that engine finally made itself available, and we're currently leasing that. It does not have any markings on it at all. That's intentional, and it is being stationed in one of our stations strictly for volunteers as a secondary means of use. And that expense is coming out of our budget. That was an unplanned expense.
And how much was that extra?
$3,000 a month.
And that's a pumper, chief?
Yes.
Absolutely need a pumper. Anything else under our whole business?
I just want to go back to something we've talked about, we talked about 5-6 months ago. But it was brought up at the selectmen meeting this month about volunteers and the money they would have to put out for courses. So can you just give just an idea of exactly what the process is for the volunteers when they have to attend courses, the reimbursement and that kind of thing, just so we're clear on what that is, and then I'll probably go to Washington.
Sure. So the volunteers, when they express an interest, we usually have them show up to drills for several meetings, several drills, secure their interest, discuss time commitment with them, discuss expectations with him or her, and unfortunately there's not what we call Firefighter 1 certification classes offered all that much. It's more or less a spring and a fall offering. And so sometimes we're at the mercy of just waiting for the next class to start. And so depending on the timing of when that volunteer onboards with us, it may be several months before they're able to attend that class. And the classes vary. They're roughly, the schedules vary a little bit, but they're roughly 2 nights a week and usually all day on a Saturday for, let's just call it 4 months. That's a big commitment for a lot of people and a lot of volunteers. When they find that out, they decide it's not for them. They can't take that kind of time and go to those kind of classes. And so one of the reasons why we bring people around for a few weeks in advance is they typically find out that either they can make that commitment or they can't. Now, historically, up until probably 5 to 6 years ago, the department would pay for that expense up front. But what we found was, I'm going to guess right now, I don't have the numbers, that probably half of the people that we sent to class within a few weeks decided that it wasn't for them. And so the town had shelled out anywhere between $1,500 and $2,500 for the class, only to have the person go for a few weeks and then say, this isn't really for me, and the town was out that money. We can't recover that money. We can't get reimbursed for it. The class starts with 20, 25 people, and it's not the kind of thing where if somebody drops out, you get your prorated return back. So we'd be out that money. So to test the individual's level of commitment and to make sure that they truly had the best interests of the department in mind, we converted that over where they put the money up front, and then as soon as they passed and they show that they passed, we would provide compensation in full within a couple of weeks. It's just a matter of providing the proof of the course being passed and the check. Now, understand it was not only a matter of people dropping out, but it's not, I wouldn't say an easy class either. It's a challenging class, and so there was an issue with people passing as well. And so even though if you would go to every class, if you couldn't pass the exams, both the didactic exams and the practical skills exams, then you weren't going to pass. So the town was burned a number of times, and so we decided to change that, and that was a policy that was made by the commission at that time. that we said that the people have to pay up front and we'll reimburse them. We take care of everything else, all the equipment, all the gear. There's no other expense that they have to take care of. We take care of the books. And then, again, we provide reimbursement.
And about how many, you may or may not know this, but I asked just in case. Do we have an idea of how often you're getting inquiries about volunteers, especially over the last year or so?
Sure, so I would say in the last 3 years, maybe 6 a year.
And out of the 6 a year, about how many a week?
A week?
No,
Oh.
6 a year, you're saying about
6 a year.
A
total.
year. So about how many of those are actually following through? And
1 or 2.
one or two? Okay.
I have another volunteer who reaches out, and I think there's value in that. I think there's, first of all, for some people, it's very intimidating to talk to me. So I have another volunteer who reaches out to them, whether they contact us through email or by voicemail on that hotline we set up. The instructions are that the line is not normally monitored. Please leave information. I'll have somebody follow with you. I immediately receive that, and I forward that to the volunteer we've appointed to be able to kind of pick up the phone and call that person and communicate with that person and discuss what the expectations are. I did see that meeting. I was aware of the comments that were made, and I have since spoken with that volunteer, and he told me that not once did somebody say that there was an issue with payment. Not once. There's not an issue with payment going to the class, there's an issue with commitment going to the class.
Last question is, what line item in the budget does the reimbursement come from?
Fire training.
Fire training, okay.
And I believe the suggestion that was made during that as well was that the town should pay for that. I think it's important to realize we're sending people to Gateway. It's a college course, and so if payment is really an issue for you, there's FAFSA that you can fill out, and you can get federal funding and federal budget going to the school loan. So I don't believe it's an issue at all with affordability of payment. And I'd argue, why would the town want to pay for tuition if the federal government's going to provide tuition assistance? That sounds like a waste of money.
Okay. All right, I know we had talked about it, I just wanted to make sure it's clear.
Any other questions regarding old business? Hearing none, we'll move on to the new business of the department. Chief?
Only new business I have is we have, as the commission is aware, we have 2 federal investigations pending related to the line of duty death of firefighter Wirtz. I have heard from NIOSH that they have rescheduled their investigation for May of this year, and we're working on finding out which dates in May they'll be here. So just for the commission's awareness, that investigation is ongoing, and we expect that to occur sometime in May. Otherwise, I have a recommendation for 2 firefighters to be elevated to grade A. We can discuss that in executive session, and perhaps, if the commission is willing, come out of executive session with a motion.
Any questions of the chief regarding new business? Chief, the discussion of the motion of
Yep, and I do that in
go to the department?
the executive session.
Okay, fine. Information on the good of the department.
I have made the commission aware of a couple of benefits coming up for the family of firefighter Wirtz. For your awareness, one is Thursday, March 2nd from 4 to 10 at J. Rue's, and the other is Sunday, March 5th from 1 to 8 at Lupa. 100% of the proceeds from these events are going to go towards the Wirtz family. Other than that, I have make the commission aware that Captain O'Beer has accepted a position as Deputy Chief of Administration with the department. That work was finalized as of before this meeting, and he'll be starting this week in that role.
Any questions of the chief regarding the good of the department? Hearing none, we'll move into public comments.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
hi. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Sally Queenie, 5 Blossom Drive. I just have a couple of quick questions about the chief's report. You said in January, 144,000 was generated in permit fees?
That's correct.
And then 395 for the year, is that calendar year or fiscal year?
Fiscal year.
Okay, great. I love when it's fiscal year statistics because we budget on a fiscal year. It's much easier to evaluate. And then you said 56 inspections were performed in January. Those are the inspections required by statute of existing commercial and industrial occupancies?
Well, the majority of them probably were, yes, I don't have a breakdown of that.
Okay, what other, or they could have been building inspections? So the fees that are generated, you said are, we have a consultant line of $100,000. Is the consultant doing those plan reviews, or are you or the deputy chief doing them?
So it's a combination of everybody. There's not anybody who does one particular thing. I don't want to run an office like that where
Okay.
it's set up that way.
Okay. And the inspections, are you doing inspections, or is the consultant doing them?
Again, it's a combination.
A combination.
Depending on what it is and the time of day and everything else.
Okay, okay. I just wanted to clarify that. I just had a couple of questions about your budget workshop before the Board of Finance, which was back in January, I think January 14th. And one of them is what we've already been talking about, the $50,000 request for a part-time fire inspector investigator. I guess, because you say in your written materials that the current funding of $100,000 is insufficient. That's the consultant line item, I assume, for Mr. Etherton. Is he still with us?
He is not, no.
He's not, there's a different?
There's somebody else.
Okay. That person, you had him identified as fire inspector investigator. Will that person be qualified or do any fire fee evaluations of construction?
Yes, but I caution us to be careful
Okay,
that we're not segregating the fee specific to the task, because the task, the fee supports the office in its entirety. The fee does not support any one task. And the fire marshal's office in itself needs to have multiple people involved in inspections and plan review at any given time in order to be successful.
right, but the only task that the fire department performs that generates fees are the plan reviews that are administered through the building department for new construction, either new building construction or renovations. So that's the distinction I'm trying to make. The only function that generates the revenue is the fire fees generated from plan review of construction. I believe it's $8 per $1,000 of construction costs. The last time I looked at the building department ordinance. So that's why I'm wondering, is this person going to be doing that kind of work that generates revenue?
Yes, but again, the revenue will not go up. The revenue is going to stay exactly the same. The expense will go up because we need additional help to be able to do everything in the fire marshal's office is tasked to do.
Well, that's exactly my point. The revenue won't go up. The revenue is determined extraneously by the amount of economic development that comes in. And this is why I'm bringing this topic up, Chief, because in your written documents you said it's a cost neutral, and I disagree with that.
Okay.
For exactly what you just said. It's not going to generate any more revenue. That revenue comes from extraneous sources. But I do believe your arguments about more efficiency to do inspections and investigations. I understand that part of it. But I think it's misleading to the folks out there to say it is cost neutral. And we do have we have a commissioner here who's a former member of the Board of Finance. Anytime you increase a line item by 50%, which is what you're proposing here with this new part-time position, going from 100,000 to 150, that is not cost neutral. And even though fire fees are generated by your department, those fire fees are part of our revenue budget. Many of our departments generate fees. The town clerk, the building department, the community services, park and rec, everybody generates fees. And those are part of our revenue budget that supports the entire expenditure budget. The way we look at budgeting, you don't look at one particular revenue line as supporting one specific expenditure. So I just wanted to say, but you seem to already made that argument for me, that more revenue will not be generated, as you said, and as I believe, it's generated extraneously by economic development. So that is the point that I wanted to make. When you add to the expenditure budget, it is never cost neutral. And then my second and final question has to do with one of our favorite topics, Chief, is contractual obligations. I wanted to talk to you about that briefly.
Sally, before you go on to that, I just want to make a comment
Sure.
on that piece that you just said about whether it's cost neutral or not. I think one of the problems with the way our budget is laid out is departments and how their revenue is generated and whether it becomes, there are things that are get minused out of line items is not consistent across departments. So if you look at the police department budget, when they bring in revenue, there are line items that have a negative balance coming in. So they take that money and they minus it out. So if you're going to do that for one department, then it should happen across all departments, and that's not necessarily the case. And I've seen it with a couple of other departments too. Like Parks and Recs, maybe one, where if they get a grant, then that comes in and it gets minused out on that level. So I think until, and this is something I've said in front of the Board of Finance multiple times, until it's consistent across the board, it's hard to compare how the different departments' budgets, whether you can consider something cost neutral or not. So,
Great. Well, I believe the chief said himself that it is not cost neutral,
So
just a few minutes ago.
I did.
I agree.
So do you think it's appropriate then that the fire marshal's office is charging for fees and the fire marshal's office is not performing to the capacity that it should?
No, the fees are generated by the plan review.
Right, and so those fees I initiated those fees. I advocated for those fees. Unlike all the other town departments you referenced, those fees have been in place for arguably decades, right? The fees that the fire department set up, I advocated for and I fought for, and if you can go back and find it on television, because I have, it's still on NHTV's site, I have documentation from that meeting of those fees going towards the fire department to support the fire marshal's office. Suddenly, when that fee became a $400,000 to a $600,000 revenue, the town wanted to grab that money and say that it's theirs. But yet, we never took care of the function of the fire marshal's office that was needed all along. Prior chiefs have said for years and years that the inspections in this town weren't getting done. So we found a way to fund the personnel to do the needed inspections, and more recently now the investigations. And I'm continuing to advocate for the people to do that. Meanwhile, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars left over that we're not using out of those fees that I advocated for that sole purpose. So that's one of the reasons why I continue to advocate for the fact that it is cost neutral. And if you go back and you look for where that expense started, it started at $150,000. It was brought down to $100,000 because I didn't have the personnel at that time that I felt confident in doing the job.
Right. I remember when you started it. It was in the summer of 2016, I believe. I remember it very well, and it begs the question why none of your predecessors advocated for it.
Maybe this is why, because the whole time they would have known, unlike I do, that we wouldn't get it to where we needed to apply it anyways. It would just be taken by the town for other reasons.
Right. Well, all fees generated go to go to the town, they don't.
Sure.
That's just how municipal budgeting
No,
works.
I
Your fire
understand.
fees don't go, you don't have your own account that those fire fees go to. I just had a problem with you saying that increasing a specific line item, which was the consultant line in your budget, from 100,000 to 150 is cost neutral. It is not. And as you acknowledged, the revenue will not go up. The revenue is generated extraneously from economic development. I certainly, I'm not saying I don't support the position. I don't support what you said at the workshop. I support what you said tonight because it was in conflict of what you said at the workshop. What you said and what is written down in your materials is that the $50,000 increase in an expenditure line is cost neutral, and that's not true. But
Wait. Sally, I think it's an interpretation because you're saying municipal budgeting doesn't work that way. But if you look at Branford's budget, any money that the fire department generates is in the fire department, and they do their own budget, and it is truly looking at the cost versus the expenses for the fire department. So this is the way that our town has chosen to do it. I don't think it's misleading to say that the cost of the fire marshal's office is being covered by the fees that are being brought in. I understand that you're saying there was an increase in the line, but the fees that they're collecting cover what it costs to run that department.
But the fees are not going up, just the expense is going up.
I understand that, but it's
That's
still-
why it's not cost neutral.
But-
I support completely what the chief was saying about the need for inspections and investigations, especially your comments about insurance fraud. I'm not questioning the need for the position, and I thought I made that clear. What I'm saying is, this position will not in and of itself generate any additional revenue, which you said before I even made my argument.
Sure.
I didn't even have to really go on with my argument. You made it for me.
I know what you're getting at.
Yeah, there you go. So I think we're in agreement. I'm not questioning the need for the position. What I'm saying is, if it's not a position that's going to create any new revenue, it's going to only make the operation of your fire marshal's office more expensive by $50,000. So it's not cost neutral, but that doesn't have anything to do with it being necessary for the effective administration of the fire marshal office. So I support the position. I did not support you saying it was cost neutral. But I think we've gone beyond that.
Sure.
And I'm ready to, and I think you now agree with me on that. So I think we can move on to my question about contractual obligations. Just to give the folks at home a little background, much to your credit, you started separating contractual obligations from overtime in the fire department budget back in, I believe, 1819. Before that, it was just all overtime, and it was very confusing for people, especially on the Board of Finance, to figure out what was going on.
Sure.
And so I think I commended you then, and I commend you now again for separating it out into overtime, which is when you call in staff not on duty because of some sort of emergency, that's overtime, versus contractual obligations, which is filling a spot in a shift because someone's out for vacation or personal time or sick time, bereavement, or various other reasons that they could be out under the CBA. So my question has to do with a comment you made about your request for an increase of $60,586. Now, this year, the current fiscal year of 22-23, we did add 2 more firefighters. I understand they're not going on duty until probably July.
June, July.
And they're probably in training now, right? I mean, but we do have those 2 making 2 shifts, 11, correct?
Yes,
To be
as of July.
as of July when they finish their training. And so you had requested an increase of $60,000. Let me just give you a quick history. Since 1819, when you separated out contractual obligations, the next year there was a zero change. It stayed at 783. Then it went up 69,000 to 852,000. Then it went up 21,000. And then in the current fiscal year, it went up 13,000, even though you had requested that the contractual obligation line increase 103,000. This year, you requested an increase of 60,586, and you were asked at the Board of Finance workshop about the $180,000 savings that you had predicted would occur by going to 11-man shift. You actually said 340, but because it's only half, that was the 340,000 of savings was based on 4 people, meaning 11 on all 4 shifts. We have only 2. And so you were asked about the $180,000 in anticipated savings. And your response was, hold on, I have your quote. You said, quote, you said the 180,000 savings for 2 11-man shifts is already applied to the $60,000 increase request. Otherwise, the request would have been $240,000 increase, unquote. So my question is, given the history of the last 5 years since you appropriately separated out contractual obligations, and the changes have averaged maybe 30,000, I'm doing a quick math here, 30 to 40,000 a year, why would it have gone up 240? Why would your request have gone up 240 if it were not for these 2 people on the extra shifts?
Well, since 2019, there is, let's say 170, 160 more vacation days within the bargaining unit than there was.
Right.
So that's a significant number right there. That's a couple $100,000 right there. And sick time is up significantly.
Okay, well, in anticipation of you answering in that fashion, I mean, since 1920, I mean, we've been doing a phase-in of 2 firefighters per year. So I think that would be an excellent argument if we hire, I mean, we've hired 10, or I should say we budgeted to hire 10 new firefighters since 18-19 fiscal year. Okay, we went from 8 men to 4 shifts at 10, plus these 2 extra. So we've hired 10 men, 10 people, excuse me, 10 people as a phase-in of 2 a year for the past 5 years. So I would understand that argument if we had hired 10 all at one time. But even with these phase-ins of 2 per year, and the change is only averaging about 30 to 40,000 per year, you're saying that you would have requested 240 because of sick time? Are there a couple of people out? Is that it?
It was a combination of sick time and again, as I think it says somewhere in this narrative here, it references the fact that the staff is becoming more senior, and with that comes more contractual vacation time. This is all driven by contract, as you know.
Yes, yes. Well, we have some of the senior, if we have, you announced Captain O'Beer is leaving to be the new deputy chief. That's great. I have great respect for Captain O'Beer. I've known him for many years, and I knew his father very well when I served on the Board of Finance. Yes. So that must help a little bit because he was a senior, probably a 30-day.
He was.
Yeah. A 30-day vacation.
I'm not going to say it doesn't help. I'm not going to be able to change the budget, unfortunately.
No, but who do you anticipate filling if the Board of Finance gives you going back for a second, the $50,000 position for fire marshal? Who do you anticipate filling that? Because I thought that was originally going to be Mr. Captain O'Bear?
That is currently David O'Bear.
David O'Bear. Oh, I confused the O'Bear brothers, as I
Yep.
often do. Okay,
So Jeffrey was promoted to deputy chief.
okay,
David
David.
retired
right.
and is filling in.
Well, they're both fabulous, dedicated
No
public
question about
servants of this department. Yes. Okay. David and Jeffrey, I forgot about the second brother. Okay. But going back, so I just found that a little I was a little amazed by your statement that that your contractual obligation increase would have been $240 had it not been for these two people. That the $180,000 savings is already factored in to that $60,000 increase. But you're saying it's a combination of increase in hours and sick time.
Yes.
Okay.
Vacation, a lot of vacation time and sick time increasing.
But you can see how, you're a data analyzer, I'm a data analyzer. You can see how, looking at the history of the line and the increases with a steady phase-in being relatively small,
Yep.
that your statement was a little shocking to me.
I completely understand.
Yeah.
It's a line that's a large line that I'm not particularly proud to discuss or happy to discuss, because I know it's such a big line with
It is a
with
big
a lot of
line.
questions
Yeah.
associated to it. But as you can appreciate, my hands are tied when it comes to that line. I analyze the last 3 years of usage of various time, and I forecast that out to what it's going to become, and it's pretty much black and white. It's number for number. This many time off equates for this many shifts that need to be filled, and you take historical sick leave, you build that into the next year. I mean, it comes out with a number.
Yeah.
The $90,000 savings is in fact a true number. If you take
180, you said.
90,000 per shift.
Per shift,
If you
okay.
take 11 people per shift and you want a minimum of 10, it's a $90,000 savings. Every single time that one person is out, you're not filling in overtime. That 11th person on a shift is filling those roles, and we're
But you're-
able to capture that savings.
You're saving the half because you're still paying the person who's out.
We are, but
Yeah.
we're saving the half, but we're
You're
putting
saving
another
the half.
firefighter on.
Yeah, people think you're saving 1.5, but you're really saving a half. But I agree with that. Speaking of the two, since we're talking about the two people making two shifts 11, because again, for the folks at home, the fire department has 4 shifts that work 24 hours, and then they're off 3 days, and then they work 24 hours and off 3 days. That's in accordance with the CBA. So these two people, are they gonna be assigned to a specific shift?
They have to, otherwise I can't forecast the savings I do.
Right, but because you said something else very interesting that I could appreciate must be a big problem for you. Something else you said at the workshop that I found very interesting, that the younger folks just don't want to work overtime. So is it a problem for you to find people to fill the contractual obligation?
Very much so.
And so having these, that's why I asked the question about the two, whether they'd be like floaters that
There's no way-
can't work that
You
way.
can't, if the contract doesn't allow for it. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that become very unfair in this particular economic climate that we're in, is when people start referencing how much a police officer or a firefighter makes.
Yeah.
Because it includes overtime. The firefighters and police officers were making that much additional revenue, if you will. They're being forced to work.
Oh, you mean all those
They're not-
the articles in the paper?
they're not- Most of the time, some of them are offering to work, but it's because somebody else doesn't want to work, they're getting that many shifts. And they're also, most of the time, being forced. And I know that multiple times a week, we are forcing people to stay at work.
Yeah.
And that is not a good working atmosphere at all. When somebody has plans with their kids or their wife that night, and they get told an hour before they're due to go home, you can't go home.
Yeah.
That's not a good working environment. Now,
Yeah.
is it gonna happen from time to time? Yeah, but it shouldn't be happening that much, and it's happening a lot. And it's gonna continue to happen that much more, because it seems that this The newer generation of firefighters that we're hiring are not interested in working above and beyond the normal shifts.
Yeah, I was very, I, again, was a little startled to hear you say that, and I sensed in your voice a little level of frustration, which I could understand. And I'm thinking to myself, it must be tough to fill the contractual obligation spots. Of course, when someone's out, you can fill with the work, the 24-hour shift. If I'm remembering the CBA correctly, it's divided into a 10-hour day and a 14-hour night.
Correct.
So you could split it, right? So that might make it a little easier to,
It's always been that way, and so.
yeah, and it's still difficult. So so you said that you're gonna put the two guys on a given shift. If no one's out, and all 11 are working, where will the 11th person be assigned to, what apparatus?
Between now and June, actually, the commission needs to decide that.
Okay.
And just to correct you,
Yes.
one's a female,
Well,
not two guys.
I know that, and I'm thrilled to hear that. As you know, I've been advocating for a female
Very
firefighter
excited.
for a long time. I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you very much, Chief, Mr. Chairman, for your time and attention.
Thank you. One addition to your thoughts here, the chief is talking about calling in and mandating our firefighters to stay over shift. This commission has been very concerned about the safety of our firefighters and the exhaustion. It's a very strenuous profession that they're in, and many of us sitting at this table have experienced a touch of it as to what they do. So we're deeply concerned when we have to call firefighters in and stay another shift, considering how busy we are as a fire department and how tired these firefighters are, and considering what we recently experienced in our fire department with the loss of one of our firefighters. We certainly never want to go through that again. And I'm hopeful that we minimize the amount of time that we call in firefighters to stay over on a shift, not to have them be exhausted on that shift. But I understand the reason why the chief would be necessary to do so.
So if somebody just finishes their normal, regular 24-hour shift, which goes 8 a.m. to 8 a.m., I believe, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. They could, and somebody on the following shift calls out suddenly, sometimes when you're ill, there's not much notice. Could someone who just finished 24 stay on?
You have a copy of the contract. If you
Yeah,
look at it,
I'm
they
gonna
can
have
work for 5 consecutive shifts. So that's 2.5 days
You can.
with the order in for the 6th. So you could potentially be at work for 3 straight days, which makes it pretty tough at some points, particularly in the summertime, which is one of the reasons why I think it leads to abuse in a lot of ways. It can anyways, is you sometimes have firefighters who will come in on a Friday and don't go home until Monday.
Yeah.
Because there's nobody that will work. And it's not just North Haven that's seeing this, it's everywhere that's seeing
I
this.
see.
It's a problem that a lot of the chiefs in the area and in the state are talking about right now.
Yes, I do have the CBA. It's about a 48-page document. I don't have it. I know quite a bit of it, but I don't have it all to memory, so thank you. I didn't remember that particular provision. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other public comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to move into executive session.
So
Do I hear a second? Any question on the motion? All in favor? So moved. Reconvene the Tuesday, February 28, 2023 North Haven Fire Commission meeting to order. We have a couple of motions to make. Commissioner Mulligan?
I make a motion that we promote Lieutenant Jeff Haig to the position of captain at the chief's discretion.
Do I hear a second to the motion?
I second it.
Is there any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Commissioner Gallo?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to elevate firefighters Josh Piscatello and Justin Rondo to grade A effective February 28, 2023.
Do I hear a second to the motion?
Second.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Is there any further business coming before this commission? Hearing none, I'd like to announce that the next regularly scheduled Board of Fire Commission meeting will be held on Tuesday, March 28, 2023 at 6 p.m. at the Montauk Company 282 Quinnipiac Avenue Station. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.